You say will allow people who, if their local officials are not getting the job done and they suffer losses personally or professionally, they'd be able to sue. How is that going to work? I mean, could they sue the mayor directly? Could they go after the city of Chicago? What do you envision?
They could sue the city, and they could get triple damages if you have local politicians who are wrongfully denying police protection. You know, this is a really tough time for our country right now. We're seeing riots across the country. We're seeing violence and police cars being firebombed, police officers being murdered, and violent mobs within our cities. But even worse, in the face of that, we're also seeing Democratic politicians, Democratic mayors, Democratic governors, who've somehow made the decision it's in their political best interest to allow the mob to carry out their violence, and they're refusing to protect their own citizens. They're allowing these lawless, autonomous zones to exist within their boundaries. That has never happened in modern times. And so I introduced this week legislation that if an elected official wrongfully denies their citizens the right to police protection in the situation of a riot, that you can sue them and get triple damages for any injuries you suffer or for any damage to your home or your business. You know, a lot of these Democratic politicians sat by as small businesses were looted and burned to the ground. Many of those small business owners were African American or Hispanics, but the Democratic politicians didn't care. It was in their, what they defined as their partisan interest, to allow the mob to rage. That's not right.
Yeah, we're going to talk to a minority business owner out of Minneapolis whose business was torched and how he's dealt with that in the days and weeks since these riots have played out. Now, there are a number of these lawmakers who say it is the Trump administration by sending in people in uniforms that look like camo, they look like troops, they look like military. They're not, but they're actually stoking the violence. I got a notice tonight that the ACLU is suing DHS, U.S. Marshals, and others for, quote, attacking volunteer medics at protests. They say volunteer medics should be celebrated, not attacked or arrested. These attacks are unconscionable as well as unconstitutional. This lawlessness must end, referring there to the lawlessness by, in their estimation, federal authorities.
You know, this shouldn't be complicated. These are pretty simple rules in life. Don't physically hurt somebody else. Don't assault somebody else. Don't burn their business to the ground. Don't murder somebody else. But yet the violent mobs aren't following that. And in this instance, so what's happened is these mobs are attacking federal buildings. They're attacking federal courthouses. Now, it ought to be real simple. If you attack a federal courthouse, the answer ought to be you're going to be arrested, you're going to be put in jail, you're going to stay in jail a long time. It's real simple. Don't attack a federal courthouse. Well, what the federal government is quite reasonably doing is sending federal law enforcement agencies to protect federal buildings, protect federal courthouses. And I've never seen anything like it. Actually, you know what? I say I've never seen anything like it. Yes, I have. What these Democrats are doing is the same thing we saw Democrats do in the 1950s and 60s. It's the same thing Democratic politicians like Bull Connor did. It's the same thing that you saw Democratic racists who didn't want to segregate schools. And remember, Eisenhower sent in the Army and said, you're going to follow Brown versus Board of Education. And you had elected Democrats, and they were all Democrats who were enforcing Jim Crow, who said, get your federal officers out of here. Well, guess what? You don't have the ability to throw the federal government out. You don't have the ability to throw federal law enforcement officers out. And you certainly don't have the ability to say, we're going to allow the federal courthouse or the federal building to burn. You know what? If the Chicago mayor wants to allow the mob to rampage in City Hall and occupy her office, that's her decision. Knock yourself out if you want to give in to the lawlessness, but she doesn't have the right to give up the federal courthouse, and neither does the mayor of Portland or the governor of Oregon or any of these Democrats who they've made a decision. Well, the police are the enemy and the mob are their allies, and it's wrong.
We know that the Chicago mayor and the president had a phone call tonight. We understand it was brief and straightforward as they discussed the exact role that federal authorities will play there. Okay, if we can do lightning round, there are a couple more things I definitely want to ask you about if we can have quick answers. Okay, China. The Chinese embassy pushing back against the orders to evacuate the Houston consulate today, saying we strongly condemn and firmly oppose the abrupt demand. They call it a political provocation and say you got to reverse this or we will respond with legitimate and necessary actions.
Well, listen, China's behavior for a long, long time has been terrible. They have committed murder. They've committed torture. They covered up the coronavirus outbreak in Wuhan that led to over 600,000 people dying worldwide. And with respect to the Houston consulate, what the State Department has said is that they have credible evidence of both theft of intellectual property and espionage being carried out of that consulate. Now, today, I urge the State Department, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, to make their evidence public. I'm going to be receiving a classified briefing this week about the details of what evidence they had. But I think it'd be a good thing to make that case publicly to the world to lay out China's theft and China's spying that they've been carrying out in our country. Okay.
10 seconds. You and Mark Cuban going to be okay?
Oh, well, it's actually the same issue. You know, Mark Cuban, at first he said anyone who's upset at kneeling to the flag, don't come to the NBA. Then he decided to insult me, and I said, well, tell us what you think about China. And the NBA is more interested in money than actually speaking out on China, so he had nothing else to say on that.
Well, he did say today that they will continue to honor wounded warriors and soldiers and bring them in for games and do those kinds of things. So we will leave it to the two of you to work out. You can agree that the two of you is a good thing. Senator Cruz, always good to see you. Thanks.
Pleasure.